The thing at pump 4 is wearing my dead brother's face, and it's been staring at the security camera for the past hour without blinking. I can see maggots crawling out of its mouth every time it smiles. But when I look outside, there's nothing there except blood pooling around the gas pump. You think working nights at a gas station is easy money. Just sit behind bulletproof glass, sell cigarettes and energy drinks, clean the restrooms every few hours. Most nights it is easy. Highway 47 cuts through nothing but farmland and forest for 60 miles. So after midnight, you might see 3 cars total. Truckers grabbing coffee, teenagers sneaking beer, the occasional drunk trying to figure out which direction leads home. My name's Tyler Brooks, and I've been working the graveyard shift at Murphy's Gas & Go for 2 years now. Ever since my brother Danny died in that car accident. Ever since I needed something to keep me busy during the hours when sleep wouldn't come. The isolation suits me. No customers asking stupid questions. No boss breathing down my neck. Just me, the security monitors, and whatever's playing on the radio to keep me company until sunrise. Danny used to joke that I'd end up like one of those weird hermits who talk to themselves, spending so much time alone that I'd forget how to have normal conversations. Maybe he was right. Maybe that's why I'm seeing things that can't possibly be real. But the blood looks pretty damn real. It started 3 hours ago when I clocked in at 11 p.m. Nothing unusual. Mrs. Patterson from the day shift left me her notes about the broken Slurpee machine and reminded me to check the propane tanks before I left. Standard stuff. She's been here longer than anyone. Knows every regular customer by name. Treats this place like her second home. I settled in behind the counter with my thermos of coffee and my book, some Stephen King novel about a haunted hotel, and waited for the long, quiet night to pass. The security system has 8 cameras, covering every angle of the parking lot, the pump islands, and the interior of the store. Usually they just show empty asphalt and fluorescent lights. Occasionally a raccoon or stray cat wandering through the frame. But tonight they're showing me things that make my skin crawl. The first sign something was wrong came around midnight. I was reading, half watching the monitors out of the corner of my eye, when I noticed movement on camera 3. A figure, tall and thin, walking between the pump islands like he owned the place. Nothing strange about that. People stop for gas at all hours. But when I looked up from my book to see if he needed help, the parking lot was empty, completely empty. No car, no person, no sign that anyone had been there at all. I figured it was just a glitch in the camera system. These monitors are older than dirt, probably installed sometime in the 1990s, and they've been acting up lately. Flickering screens, distorted images, the kind of technical problems you learn to ignore when you work somewhere that hasn't been updated since the Clinton administration. But then I saw him again on camera 5. Same figure, same thin build. But now, he was standing directly under one of the overhead lights, and that's when I got my first clear look at his face. It was Danny, my brother Danny, who'd been dead for 3 years. Standing in my parking lot like he was waiting for me to come outside and say hello. My hands started shaking so badly I nearly dropped my coffee. Danny looked exactly the same as the last time I'd seen him alive. Same messy brown hair. Same crooked smile. Same leather jacket he'd worn every day since high school. But something was wrong with his eyes. They were too dark, too hollow. Like someone had scooped out everything behind them and left only empty sockets. I stared at the monitor for a full minute, watching my dead brother stand motionless under the light, before I finally worked up the courage to look outside. But when I pressed my face against the glass, there was nothing there. Just empty pavement and the hum of fluorescent bulbs. I told myself it was stress, grief playing tricks on my mind, working too many nights alone, reading too many horror novels, letting my imagination run wild in the darkness. Danny was dead. I'd seen his body at the funeral. I'd watched them lower his casket into the ground. Dead people don't just show up at gas stations in the middle of the night, but they do, apparently, because he came back. At 12:30 a.m., Camera 6 picked him up standing next to Pump 4. Just standing there, not moving, not pumping gas, just staring directly at the camera with those hollow, empty eyes. And this time, I could see details that made my blood freeze in my veins. His skin was gray, mottled, like meat that had been left out too long. His clothes were dirty, stained with something dark that could have been oil or blood, or worse. And when he opened his mouth in what might have been a smile, I could see things moving inside, small white things, crawling, writhing, pouring out between his teeth like rice from a torn bag. Maggots. My brother's corpse was infested with maggots, and it was smiling at me through a security camera. I ran to the window, pressing my face against the cold glass, desperate to prove that what I was seeing wasn't real. But the parking lot was still empty. No Danny. No corpse. No sign of anything supernatural. Just the steady drip of condensation from the overhead canopy and the distant sound of traffic on the highway. But when I looked back at the monitor, he was still there, still staring, still smiling, still letting those white, writhing things spill from his rotting mouth. That's when I noticed the blood. At first, it was just a small puddle around his feet, dark and thick, spreading slowly across the concrete. But as I watched, it grew larger, flowing away from where Danny stood like he was bleeding from wounds I couldn't see. The blood moved wrong, though. Too slow, too deliberate, like it was alive, like it had purpose, and it was spelling something, letter by letter. The blood crawled across the pavement, forming words that made my heart stop beating for several long seconds. Tyler, my name, written in blood that flowed from my dead brother's body. I grabbed my phone and called the police, fingers trembling so badly I could barely dial the numbers. But what was I supposed to tell them? That my dead brother was standing in my parking lot, bleeding supernatural blood that spelled my name? That the security cameras were showing me things that weren't really there? They'd think I was crazy. Hell, I was starting to think I was crazy. The dispatcher answered on the third ring. 911. What's your emergency? This is Tyler Brooks at Murphy's Gas and Go on Highway 47. I think someone's... There's blood in my parking lot, and how do you explain something that can't be explained? Are you injured, sir? Do you need an ambulance? No. I'm not injured. But there's someone outside. Someone who shouldn't be here. Someone who's been dead for 3 years. Long pause. Sir, are you under the influence of any substances? Have you been drinking tonight? No. I'm stone sober. But my brother, my dead brother, he's standing at pump 4 and he's bleeding and the blood is writing my name and... Sir, I'm going to need you to calm down. We're sending a unit to your location. Stay inside the building and don't approach anyone outside. Can you do that for me? I hung up without answering. What was the point? By the time the cops arrived, Danny would be gone. The blood would be gone. There'd be no evidence that anything supernatural had happened. Just a crazy night clerk who'd been alone too long. But when I looked back at the monitor, things had gotten worse, much worse. Danny wasn't alone anymore. There were others, dozens of them, standing throughout the parking lot like some kind of undead convention. I recognized some of the faces, People from town who'd died over the past few years. Mrs. Henderson, who'd had the heart attack at the grocery store. Tommy Martinez, who'd overdosed behind the high school. Sarah Chen, who'd been killed in the factory explosion last spring. All of them gray. All of them rotting. All of them staring at the camera with empty, hungry eyes. And they were all bleeding. Rivers of dark blood flowing from invisible wounds, mixing together on the asphalt, forming new words, new messages, new threats written in the language of the dead. You're next. Tyler, join us. Tyler, we've been waiting. Tyler. The blood covered half the parking lot now. A lake of death spreading toward the building, toward me, like it was trying to seep through the walls and drag me outside where the corpses waited. I checked every window, every door, making sure everything was locked, making sure nothing could get inside. But as I moved through the store, I started noticing things that shouldn't be there. Handprints on the glass doors, too many fingers, ender, arranged wrong, footprints on the floor, wet and dark, leading from the entrance to the counter where I'd been sitting. Someone, something, had already been inside. The radio crackled with static, and then a voice came through. Danny's voice, clear as day, like he was standing right behind me. Tyler, why won't you come outside? I've been waiting so long to see you again. We all have. Don't you want to join the family reunion? I spun around, but nobody was there. Just shelves of snacks and drinks, bright fluorescent lighting, the familiar smell of coffee and industrial cleaner. But Danny's voice continued, coming from the speakers, coming from the walls, coming from everywhere, and nowhere at once. You blame yourself for the accident, don't you, Tyler? You think it's your fault I'm dead. You think if you'd been a better brother, if you'd stopped me from driving that night, if you'd said something different, or done something different, I'd still be alive. The voice was right. I did blame myself. Danny had been drinking at Murphy's bar, called me around 10 p.m. asking for a ride home. But I was tired. I was busy. I told him to call a cab. 20 minutes later, he wrapped his car around an oak tree on Highway 47, less than 2 miles from where I was sitting right now. It wasn't your fault, Tyler. Danny's voice whispered through the speakers. But that doesn't matter now. What matters is that you're alone. You're guilty. You're ready to join us. Ready to stop running from what you did. The security monitors all changed at once, showing the same image on every screen. Danny standing directly outside the front door, his rotting hand pressed against the glass, those hollow eyes staring straight at me. But this time I could see more details, details that made my stomach turn inside out. His face was partially caved in, skull visible through torn skin. Brain matter leaked down his forehead like gray paint. His chest was crushed. Ribs poking through his shirt, puncturing organs that spilled dark fluid onto the pavement. This was how he'd looked after the accident, after the car compressed his body into something barely recognizable as human. Come outside, Tyler, he whispered, and I could see his lips moving on the monitor. See maggots falling from his mouth with every word. Come join your family. Come pay for what you did. The other corpses began moving, shambling toward the building, surrounding it like some kind of undead siege. They pressed their faces against the windows, leaving smears of blood and decay on the glass. Their empty eye sockets focused entirely on me. I grabbed the phone and tried calling 911 again, but the line was dead. No dial tone, no static, nothing. Same with my cell phone. No signal, no connection to the outside world. I was completely cut off, trapped inside Murphy's Gas and Go while an army of the dead waited for me to surrender. That's when the lights started going out, not all at once, but one by one, starting with the parking lot and working its way toward the building. Each light that died left more shadows, more places for the corpses to hide, more darkness creeping toward me like a living thing. The fluorescent tubes inside the store began flickering, buzzing, threatening to leave me in total darkness with whatever was trying to get inside. I grabbed a flashlight from behind the counter. I checked the batteries, prayed it would last until sunrise, but sunrise was still 5 hours away. The front door rattled. Someone, something, trying the handle. Then the back door. Then the windows. The corpses were testing every possible entrance, looking for weaknesses, planning their assault. Danny's voice came through the radio again. Closer now, more intimate, like he was whispering directly in my ear. "You can't hide forever, Tyler. We know you're in there. We can smell your guilt, your fear, your loneliness. You've been punishing yourself for 3 years, working nights, avoiding people, living like a ghost. Why not make it official?" The security monitors showed the corpses climbing onto the roof, crawling along the walls, finding ways to get closer that I hadn't considered. Some of them were missing limbs. Others had their heads hanging at impossible angles, but they all moved with the same determined purpose. They wanted me, and they weren't going to give up until they got me. I heard scratching sounds from above, fingernails, or maybe bones, clawing at the roof tiles. Then the sound of breaking glass from somewhere in the back of the store. They were getting inside, finding ways in, ways I couldn't possibly guard against. The radio crackled again, but this time it wasn't Danny's voice. It was Sarah Chen, the girl who died in the factory explosion. "He's trying to save you, Tyler, but you won't listen. You never listen. That's why we're all dead, because people like you don't pay attention when others need help." Then Mrs. Henderson, the old woman who'd had the heart attack. I called for help, screamed for someone to notice, but everyone just walked past. Just like you walked past Danny when he needed a ride, just like you walk past everyone who needs something from you. One by one, the voices of the dead filled the radio, each one blaming me for their deaths, each one demanding justice, each one promising that tonight I'd finally pay for my sins of negligence. The scratching sounds from the roof got louder, more urgent, like dozens of skeletal hands working together to tear through the building. And then, silence. Complete, absolute silence. No radio voices, no scratching, no rattling doors. Even the humming of the fluorescent lights stopped, leaving me in a bubble of perfect quiet that was somehow more terrifying than all the noise had been. That's when I heard footsteps inside the store. Slow, deliberate, wet footsteps moving through the aisles behind me. I spun around with the flashlight, sweeping the beam across rows of chips and candy and automotive supplies, but I couldn't see anyone. The footsteps continued, though, getting closer, accompanied by the sound of liquid dripping on linoleum. "Tyler," Danny's voice, but not coming from the radio this time, coming from right behind me, so close I could feel his breath on my neck. I turned around, but the flashlight beam revealed nothing. Just empty air. Just shadows that seemed to move when I wasn't looking directly at them, but I could smell him. The sweet, sick smell of rotting meat, of death, of things that should be buried underground instead of walking around gas stations at 3 in the morning. "I'm not here to hurt you, Tyler," Danny's voice whispered, so close I should have been able to touch him. "I'm here to take you home, to the place where guilt doesn't matter, where accidents are forgiven, where brothers can be together again." The flashlight beam started to dim, batteries dying, leaving me in growing darkness with my dead brother's voice echoing through the empty store. All you have to do is come outside, walk through that door, join us in the parking lot. It'll be quick, painless, like going to sleep after a very long, very tiring day. I could see shapes moving in my peripheral vision, figures walking between the shelves, but every time I turned the flashlight toward them, they disappeared, like they were made of shadow and guilt and 3 years of accumulated grief. The front door swung open, even though I knew it was locked, even though I'd checked it multiple times. Cold air rushed in, carrying the smell of blood and decay, bringing the sounds of the dead with it. They filled the store, dozens of corpses, shuffling through the aisles like customers shopping for their own deaths. I could hear them moving, could smell them rotting, could feel their empty eyes watching my every move, but I still couldn't see them clearly. They existed in the spaces between shadows, in the corners of my vision, in the places where guilt and grief create their own reality. Danny appeared in front of me, finally visible, finally real, standing between me and the only exit. His crushed skull leaked brain matter onto his shoulders. His broken ribs poked through his shirt like white fingers. His hollow eyes reflected my flashlight beam like mirrors. "It's time, Tyler," he said, maggots spilling from his mouth with every word. Time to stop running. Time to accept responsibility. Time to join the family. Behind him, the other corpses waited, patient, eternal, ready to welcome me into their ranks. Mrs. Henderson with her heart attack wounds, Tommy Martinez with his overdose track marks, Sarah Chen with her factory explosion burns, all of them unified in death, all of them waiting for Tyler Brooks to finally pay his dues. I had 2 choices: fight the impossible or surrender to the inevitable. But then I remembered something. Something Danny had said to me the last time we'd talked, the night he died. The phone call where he'd asked for a ride. "If something ever happens to me, Tyler, if I don't make it home tonight, promise me you won't blame yourself. Promise me you'll keep living. Promise me you won't become one of those people who gets stuck in the past." Those were his last words to me. Not anger, not blame, not guilt. Just love. Just concern for his little brother who had a tendency to carry the weight of the world on his shoulders. "You're not Danny," I said to the thing wearing my brother's face. "Danny would never want this. Danny would never try to make me feel guilty for surviving. Danny loved me, even when I made mistakes. Even when I let him down." The corpse's expression changed, the hollow eyes filling with something that might have been rage, or disappointment, or hunger that had been denied its meal. "You killed me, Tyler," it snarled, showing teeth full of maggots and decay. "You let me drive drunk. You let me die alone on that highway. You owe me a life, your life." "No," I said, surprising myself with how steady my voice sounded. "I made a mistake. I should have given you a ride. I should have been a better brother. But your death was an accident. And Danny, the real Danny, would never blame me for accidents." The thing that looked like my brother let out a scream that shattered every window in the store, a sound like metal tearing and bones breaking and souls being tortured in the deepest pits of hell. The other corpses began screaming too, a chorus of the damned that made my eardrums feel like they were going to burst, but they were fading, becoming transparent, losing their grip on the reality they tried to create, because I'd figured out the truth. This wasn't about Danny seeking justice. This was about my own guilt trying to destroy me, using the face of my dead brother to make me believe I deserved to die. The screaming stopped. The corpses disappeared. The broken windows repaired themselves. The blood in the parking lot evaporated like morning dew. I was alone again, standing in Murphy's Gas and Go at 3:17 a.m., holding a flashlight with dying batteries, surrounded by nothing but snacks and drinks and the normal, boring reality of a graveyard shift. But something had changed. The weight I'd been carrying for 3 years, the guilt that had been eating me alive. It felt lighter somehow. Not gone. It would never be completely gone, but manageable, bearable, human. I walked to the front door and looked out at the parking lot. Empty, clean, no blood, no corpses, no supernatural judgment waiting to drag me to hell for the crime of being imperfect. Just then, headlights appeared on Highway 47, a police cruiser, responding to my earlier call, finally arriving to check on the crazy gas station clerk who'd reported seeing dead people. I walked outside to meet them, breathing fresh air, feeling alive, feeling forgiven, not by God, not by Danny, but by myself. And sometimes, that's enough. The officer asked if I was okay, if I'd seen anything unusual, if I needed medical attention. I told him it had been a false alarm, stress from working too many nights alone, imagination running wild in the darkness. He seemed satisfied with that explanation, wrote up a brief report, and drove away. But as his taillights disappeared into the distance, I heard something that made me smile for the first time in 3 years. Danny's voice on the radio, clear and warm and full of love. "I'm proud of you, little brother. You figured it out. You chose to live instead of die. You chose forgiveness instead of guilt. That's all I ever wanted for you." The radio went quiet after that, back to its normal programming of late-night talk shows and classic rock. But I kept smiling, kept breathing, kept living, because sometimes the dead don't come back to haunt us. Sometimes they come back to set us free. I grabbed my phone and opened the video app, suddenly feeling like I had something important to share, something that might help other people who work alone, who blame themselves for things beyond their control, who let guilt eat them alive one sleepless night at a time. "My name is Tyler Brooks," I said into the camera, standing in the bright fluorescent lighting of Murphy's Gas and Go. "And I just learned something important about forgiveness. See, for the past 3 years, I've been punishing myself for my brother's death, working nights, avoiding people, living like I didn't deserve happiness." I paused, looking out at the empty parking lot where my demons had tried to claim me. But tonight, I realized something. The dead don't want us to suffer. They want us to live. They want us to learn from our mistakes and move forward and find peace. And if you're watching this, if you're working the graveyard shift somewhere, if you're carrying guilt that's eating you alive, know that forgiveness is possible. Healing is possible. Hope is possible. I held up my hand, showing the wedding ring I'd never worn because I'd never felt worthy of love. "Tomorrow, I'm going to call Sarah, my ex-fiancée, the woman I pushed away because I thought I didn't deserve happiness after Danny died. I'm going to apologize, try to make things right, start living again, instead of just surviving." The security monitors behind me showed nothing but empty parking lot. No corpses, no blood, no supernatural threats. Just the normal, boring reality of a gas station at 3:30 a.m. So, if this story meant something to you, if you've been carrying guilt that's destroying your life, don't let it win. Fight back. Choose forgiveness. Choose life. And if you work nights, anywhere, remember that you're not alone. There are people who care, people who understand, People who want you to succeed. I smiled at the camera, feeling lighter than I had in years. Hit that like button if you believe in second chances. Leave a comment if you've ever had to forgive yourself for something. Share this with someone who works alone. Someone who might need to hear that healing is possible. The sun would be up in 3 hours, bringing light, bringing hope, bringing the promise of a new day and a fresh start. My name is Tyler Brooks, and I work the graveyard shift at Murphy's Gas and Go. But I'm not a victim anymore. I'm not a prisoner of my own guilt. I'm just a guy who made a mistake, learned from it, and chose to keep living. First, I put the phone away and got back to work, cleaning the restrooms, restocking the shelves, preparing for the morning shift to arrive. Normal work, honest work, the kind of work that doesn't require supernatural horror to make it meaningful, because sometimes the most important battles aren't with ghosts or demons or things that go bump in the night. Sometimes they're with ourselves, and tonight I won. The printer on the 3rd floor just spat out my death certificate, and it's scheduled for 3:47 a.m. That's in 23 minutes. The paper's still warm, still wet with something that isn't ink, and my name, Jake Morrison, is printed in perfect Times New Roman at the top. Cause of death: failure to maintain cleanliness standards. I've been a janitor at Meridian Tower for 6 years, and I've never seen anything like this. But the timestamp keeps changing every time I look at it. 3:46 a.m., 3:45 a.m. It's counting down. You know how it is with night shift work. Everyone thinks it's easy money. Just you, the building, and 8 hours of peace and quiet. No meetings, no office politics, no small talk by the water cooler. Just mop, vacuum, empty trash, rinse, and repeat. I actually loved it at first. Meridian Tower is one of those fancy downtown high-rises. 37 floors of corporate America sleeping peacefully while I kept everything spotless. My wife Sarah used to joke that I cared more about those pristine marble floors than our own kitchen linoleum. Maybe she was right. There's something satisfying about walking through empty corridors at 2 a.m., knowing that when the sun rises, hundreds of people will walk on surfaces that gleam because of your work. It's honest labor. The kind where you can see results immediately. But tonight, something's wrong. It started around 11 p.m. when I clocked in. Nothing unusual. Harold, the day janitor, left me his notes like always. 3rd floor conference room needs extra attention. Coffee stain on carpet. 20th floor men's restroom. Someone made a mess. Supply closet running low on floor wax. Standard stuff. Harold's been here longer than anyone. 23 years of keeping Meridian Tower spotless. If he says something needs attention, you listen. I grabbed my cart from the supply closet and headed up. The wheels squeaked against the polished tile, a familiar sound that usually comforted me. Tonight, it seemed too loud, too sharp, echoing through the empty lobby like a scream. The elevator made that familiar ding as it stopped on each floor, but tonight, it kept dinging even after the doors closed. Every few minutes, ding, like phantom calls from empty floors. I figured it was just mechanical issues. These old buildings have their quirks, right? The heating system that clicks and groans all winter, the fluorescent lights that flicker in the basement, the way certain doors slam shut even when there's no wind. You learn to ignore these things when you work nights. You have to, or you'd go crazy listening to every strange sound. Wrong. By midnight, I'd finished floors 1 through 5. Nothing out of the ordinary except, well, the elevator kept dinging, and I started noticing things. Little things at first. Like how the cubicles on the 4th floor had papers scattered across the desks. even though I knew Harold had straightened everything earlier. Or how the coffee in the break room was still warm, steaming, actually, when nobody had been in the building for hours. The security logs showed the last employee had badged out at 6:37 p.m. That was over 5 hours ago. Coffee doesn't stay hot for 5 hours, not without someone constantly brewing fresh pots. But there it was. 3 different coffee makers, all with fresh, hot coffee. Steam rising from the carafes like incense in a church. I checked the timers on the machines. They were all set to automatic brewing, but the scheduled time showed 3 a.m., 4 a.m., and 5 a.m. Hours in the future, like someone, or something, was expecting a full office staff to arrive in the middle of the night, but I kept working. That's what you do in this job. You ignore the weird stuff and focus on the paycheck. Sarah's been out of work for 3 months since her company downsized. Emma's college tuition increased again this semester. The mortgage payment is due in 2 weeks. You don't walk away from steady employment just because the building makes strange noises. Then I got to the 7th floor. The computer monitors were on. All of them. Glowing blue in the darkness like electronic eyes watching my every move. The screensaver should have kicked in hours ago, but instead, they were displaying text. The same text. Over and over. Scrolling across every single screen in perfect synchronization. Jake Morrison. Failure to maintain cleanliness standards. Jake Morrison. Failure to maintain cleanliness standards. Jake Morrison. Failure to maintain cleanliness standards. My blood went cold. Nobody else was supposed to be in the building. Security had already done their rounds at 10 p.m. and wouldn't be back until 6 a.m. The keycard logs would show I was the only one here, so who was typing my name? And how did they know about cleanliness standards? The exact phrase from my employee handbook. I approached one of the workstations slowly, my sneakers squeaking against the polished floor. The sound echoed through the empty office space, bouncing off glass partitions and cubicle walls. The keyboard wasn't even being touched, but letters kept appearing on the screen, one by one, like invisible fingers pecking away at the keys with deliberate, methodical precision. J-A-K-E, Morrison, W-I-L-D-I-E-T-O-N-I-G-H-T, J-A-K-E, Morrison, W-I-L-D-I-E-T-O-N-I-G-H-T, J-A-K-E, Morrison, Y-L-D-I-E-T-O-N-I-G-H-T. The same message appeared on every screen. Dozens of monitors, all typing the same threat in perfect unison. I yanked the power cord from the wall. The screen went black, but the typing sounds continued. Click, 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 click. Ghostly fingers still working on a keyboard that no longer existed. I unplugged every computer on the floor, one by one, pulling cords from walls and surge protectors. But the typing sounds multiplied. Dozens of invisible hands, working on keyboards that had no power, creating words that appeared on screens that showed nothing but black reflection. That's when I should have left. Should have called security, called my supervisor, called someone. But I didn't. You know why? Because I needed this job. My daughter's tuition was due next month, and my wife's medical bills weren't going to pay themselves. The health insurance through Meridian Building Services was the only thing standing between us and bankruptcy, so I did what every working man does when faced with the impossible. I convinced myself it was nothing. Electrical problems. That's all. Maybe a power surge. Maybe some kind of computer virus. Maybe electromagnetic interference from the cell towers on the roof. There had to be a logical explanation. There always is. if you're desperate enough to believe it. I moved to the 8th floor, trying to shake off the creepy feeling crawling up my spine like ice water in my veins. But the phantom elevator kept dinging, and now I could hear something else. Footsteps, heavy boots walking the corridors above me, matching my pace perfectly. When I stopped to empty a trash can, they stopped. When I moved to the next office, they moved. When I paused to catch my breath, the footsteps paused too. I looked up at the ceiling tiles, trying to pinpoint the source of the sound. But sound carries strangely in empty buildings. Could be coming from anywhere. The 9th floor, the 10th, maybe even the roof. Could be a security guard doing rounds. Except security had already finished for the night. Could be maintenance workers, except I was the only maintenance worker on duty. The 9th floor was worse. Every single printer in the office was running, all 15 of them, spitting out page after page of documents I couldn't read from a distance. The sound was deafening. Mechanical whirring and paper sliding through feeders in perfect synchronization, like a factory assembly line producing something urgent, something important, something that couldn't wait until morning. The printers were different models, different brands, some old dot matrix monsters from the 1990s, others sleek laser printers that cost more than my car, but they were all working together, feeding paper at the exact same rate, creating a rhythm that sounded almost like a heartbeat. Thump, whir, click. Thump, whir, click. Thump, whir, click. I walked over to the nearest printer and picked up one of the fresh pages, still warm from the machine, and covered in what looked like official text. But as I held it up to the emergency lighting, my heart nearly stopped beating. It was an obituary. My obituary. Jake Morrison, age 42, died tragically while performing his duties as a maintenance worker at Meridian Tower. Born in Cleveland, Ohio, Jake moved to the city in 2003 to pursue opportunities in building services. He is survived by his wife Sarah Morrison of 18 years and daughter Emma Morrison, currently enrolled at State University studying pre-med. Jake was known for his dedication to his work and his commitment to maintaining the highest standards of cleanliness and professionalism. Services will be held at Riverside Funeral Home on Thursday, with viewing hours from 2 p.m. to 8 p.m. In lieu of flowers, the family requests donations to the Emma Morrison Education Fund. The details were perfect. My age, my birthplace, my anniversary, my daughter's major, even the funeral home where my parents had their services. Information that wasn't in any company database. Details that only someone who knew me personally could possibly have. But the date of death. The date of death was today. And the time, 4:15 a.m. I dropped the paper like it was on fire and grabbed another one. Same obituary, same details. But this time the death was listed as 4:10 a.m. The next page said 4:05 a.m. The one after that said 4 a.m. They were all different, all counting down, like the building itself was calculating exactly when I was going to die and adjusting the timeline in real time. My hands were shaking now, trembling so badly I could barely hold the papers. The rational part of my brain kept screaming that this was impossible, that printers don't just produce obituaries for living people, that buildings don't predict deaths, that there had to be some explanation that didn't involve supernatural forces. But the papers kept coming, page after page of my own death notice, each one moving the timeline closer to the present moment. And the details were getting more specific. The latest obituary included my social security number, my mother's maiden name, even the scar on my left knee from when I fell off my bike at age 7. I ran to the next printer. Same thing. My name, my death, counting down minute by minute. But these obituaries were different. more detailed, more personal. They included quotes from coworkers I'd barely spoken to, memories from my childhood that I'd never shared with anyone, even thoughts I'd had earlier that evening about wanting to find a different job. All 12 printers on the 9th floor were producing the same documents. Hundreds of copies of my obituary, creating a paper trail of my impending doom. The sound was hypnotic, rhythmic, like some kind of funeral march played on mechanical instruments. That's when I noticed something else. Something that made my blood freeze in my veins. The building was getting dirty again. I know that sounds impossible. I'd already cleaned floors 1 through 8, mopped every surface, vacuumed every carpet, emptied every trash can, wiped down every desk and countertop. My back ached from the work. My hands were raw from gripping cleaning supplies, and I'd gone through half a bottle of floor cleaner getting the marble lobby spotless. But now there were footprints in the hallways, muddy tracks leading from the elevator to every office I'd already finished. Not just one set of prints, dozens of them. Like an entire army had marched through the building while I was working upstairs, and the trash cans. They were full again, overflowing with crumpled papers and coffee cups and sandwich wrappers that hadn't been there an hour ago. The building was undoing my work. I grabbed my mop and bucket and started cleaning the 9th floor frantically, desperately, like my life depended on it. Maybe if I could just finish my job. Maybe if I could get everything spotless again. The printers would stop. The obituaries would stop. The countdown would stop. But with every surface I cleaned, 2 more got dirty. With every trash can I emptied, 3 more filled up with garbage that seemed to materialize out of thin air. The building was fighting back, creating mess faster than any human could possibly clean it. Coffee stains appeared on carpets I'd just shampooed. Fingerprints smeared across windows I'd just polished. Dust settled on furniture I'd just dusted. It was like watching time run backward, seeing hours of careful work destroyed in seconds. And the footsteps above me were getting louder. Not just one person now, but dozens, maybe hundreds of invisible feet walking across floors I hadn't reached yet. The sound was overwhelming, a thunderous march that shook the ceiling tiles and rattled the fluorescent lights. Like every person who'd ever worked in Meridian Tower was returning for one final shift, all of them walking in perfect synchronization, all of them heading toward the same destination, me. By the time I reached the 15th floor, I was exhausted. My back ached like I'd been lifting concrete blocks. My hands were raw and bleeding from gripping the mop handle so tightly, and sweat was pouring down my face despite the air conditioning running full blast. But I kept working because what else could I do? Stop cleaning and let the building win? Give up and accept that I was going to die in less than 2 hours? The obituaries were still printing. Every floor I passed, every office I entered. The machines were running constantly, and the death time kept getting closer. 3:55 a.m., 3:50 a.m., 3:45 a.m. Some of the newer obituaries included cause of death details that made my stomach turn. Crushed by falling debris, poisoned by cleaning chemicals, heart attack brought on by extreme terror. The footsteps weren't just above me anymore. They were beside me, behind me, surrounding me on all sides. Heavy boots on carpet, dress shoes on tile, sneakers on linoleum, high heels on marble, like an invisible army marching through the building, following my every move, matching my pace step for step. I tried to ignore them, tried to focus on my work, tried to pretend that the sound of hundreds of ghostly feet was just my imagination running wild. But when I stopped to catch my breath, they stopped too. When I moved to the next office, they moved with me. When I turned around to look behind me, The footsteps paused, waiting, like they were watching me, studying me, planning something. On the 20th floor, I found something that made my blood freeze solid in my veins. In the main conference room, sitting on the long mahogany table where executives held their monthly board meetings, was a single piece of paper, not from a printer this time. This one was handwritten, in my own handwriting, using my own pen, the cheap ballpoint I kept in my shirt pocket for marking supply orders. Jake, you can't clean fast enough. The building wants you dirty. The building wants you dead. You've been fighting a losing battle since the moment you clocked in. Every surface you clean, every trash can you empty, every stain you remove, it all comes back worse than before. The building is hungry, Jake. It feeds on order, on cleanliness, on the sweat and effort of people like you. And tonight, it's going to eat you alive. Stop fighting and accept your fate. Your wife will find someone better. Your daughter will forget your name. Nobody will remember the janitor who couldn't keep up with his work. I didn't write that. I know I didn't write that. I would never, could never, write something so cruel about my own family. But the handwriting was unmistakably mine, down to the way I dot my I's and cross my T's, down to the way I make my capital letters slightly larger than they should be, like something had possessed my hand, forced me to write my own death sentence in my own words. The footsteps were getting closer now, not from above, not from the sides, but from directly behind me, getting louder with each passing second, no longer trying to match my pace, no longer pretending to be anything other than what they were. Predators, hunters, things that had been stalking me through 37 floors of corporate hell, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. I spun around but saw nothing, just empty cubicles and darkened offices, just shadows that seemed to move when I wasn't looking directly at them. But the sound continued. Boots on carpet, getting closer, closer, so close I could feel the vibrations through the floor beneath my feet. I ran to the elevator and jabbed the button with my finger. Once, twice, 3 times. Come on, come on. The doors opened with that familiar ding, and I dove inside like I was escaping a burning building. 25th floor, 26th. But the footsteps were still with me, inside the elevator, breathing down my neck, even though nobody else was there. I could feel hot breath on the back of my neck, smell something like old coffee and industrial disinfectant, hear the faint sound of something, whispering my name over and over again. Jake, 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 like a prayer, or a curse, or a countdown to something terrible. When the doors opened on the 30th floor, I saw them. People, dozens of people, maybe hundreds, standing at their desks, working quietly in the darkness like it was the middle of a normal business day. But they weren't moving normally. Their heads were tilted at unnatural angles, turned too far to the left or right, like their necks had been broken but they were still somehow alive. Their fingers typed without touching keyboards, clicking away at keys that weren't there, creating documents on screens that showed nothing but static. And they were all looking at me, not just glancing in my direction, but staring with the kind of focused intensity that made my skin crawl. Their eyes reflected the computer screens like mirrors, glowing blue and white in the darkness, unblinking, unmoving, totally fixated on the janitor with the mop and bucket. Jake. They whispered in unison, dozens of voices speaking as one, creating a sound like wind through a cemetery. Jake, You missed a spot." They raised their arms in perfect synchronization and pointed toward a corner of the office where I couldn't see anything in the darkness. But as I followed their pointing fingers, I noticed something that made my heart skip several beats. A wet stain on the carpet. Dark, spreading, growing larger, even as I watched, and it was moving, creeping across the floor like spilled blood, heading straight toward my feet. I backed into the elevator and hit the button for the 37th floor, jabbing it repeatedly until the doors finally closed. The top floor, the executive level, the place where the building's most important decisions were made. If I could just finish the building, if I could just get every surface clean, maybe this nightmare would end. Maybe the printers would stop. Maybe the footsteps would stop. Maybe the ghostly office workers would disappear back to wherever dead things go when they're not busy terrorizing night shift janitors. But when the doors opened, I found something worse than ghostly office workers. I found myself standing at the far end of the hallway, mop in hand, looking back at me with hollow, dead eyes that reflected nothing but emptiness. My doppelganger was wearing the same uniform, the same name tag, even the same coffee stain on the chest pocket from when I'd spilled my thermos earlier that evening. But this other Jake was wrong. Corrupted, like a photograph that had been left in the sun too long. His skin was too pale, his movements too jerky, his smile too wide and showed too many teeth. "You're too slow, Jake," my other self said in a voice that sounded like mine but echoed strangely, like it was coming from the bottom of a well. "The building's already won. It won the moment you clocked in tonight. It won the moment you decided that a paycheck was worth more than your life." The phantom Jake pointed to the nearest printer, which was spitting out fresh obituaries faster than ever before. But these weren't just my death notices anymore. These had other names on them, familiar names, names that made my heart stop beating for several long seconds. Sarah Morrison, died 3:55 a.m. Emma Morrison, died 4 a.m. Harold Peterson, died 4:05 a.m. Mrs. Chen, from accounting, died 4:10 a.m. Mike, from security, died 4:15 a.m. Everyone I'd ever worked with, everyone I'd ever spoken to, everyone I'd ever cared about. The building wasn't just coming for me, it was going to kill them all. My wife, my daughter, my co-workers, my neighbors, everyone whose life had intersected with mine in even the smallest way. The thing wearing my face smiled wider, showing teeth that were too sharp, too many, too wrong. The building doesn't just want you, Jake. It wants everyone you've ever touched, everyone you've ever loved, everyone you've ever exchanged more than 5 words with. And it's going to get them. Because you can't clean fast enough. Because no one can clean fast enough. Because this building has been hungry for decades. And tonight, it finally gets to feast. I looked at my watch with trembling hands. 3:47 a.m. According to the first obituary I'd found 4 hours ago, I should be dead right now, but I was still standing, still breathing, still holding my mop like a weapon against the impossible. The countdown had stopped, frozen at the moment of my predicted death, but I was still alive. "How?" I whispered. "Because you're still cleaning," the other Jake replied, his voice echoing from multiple directions at once, like there were dozens of him speaking from every corner of the hallway. "As long as you keep working, as long as you keep the building spotless, it can't kill you. But the moment you stop, the moment you give up, the moment you miss even one small stain, everyone dies. Your wife dies. Your daughter dies. Everyone dies because Jake Morrison couldn't keep up with his work." I understood now. This wasn't just about me dying in some freak accident. This was about eternal servitude, an endless cycle of cleaning and recleaning, forever trapped in Meridian Tower while the building slowly consumed everyone I'd ever cared about. A punishment that fit the crime. The janitor who cared more about spotless floors than human relationships, doomed to clean forever, while watching his loved ones die one by one. The phantom Jake began to dissolve, melting away like wax under heat. But his voice continued to echo through the empty hallway. You have two choices, Jake. Keep cleaning forever. Become the building's permanent prisoner. Sacrifice your life to save everyone else's. Or stop working and watch the world burn because of your selfishness. Either way, you lose. Either way, the building wins. Oh, the printers kept running, now producing obituaries for my entire neighborhood, my high school classmates, people I'd met once at parties years ago, the barista at the coffee shop who knew my order, the mailman who always waved when he saw me working late. Hundreds of names, thousands of names, everyone whose life had been touched by mine in even the smallest way. And the timestamp kept counting down from 3:47 a.m., over and over, like a broken clock that couldn't move forward, but wouldn't stop trying. I had two choices: eternal imprisonment or mass murder. But then I realized something that the building, or whatever evil presence controlled it, hadn't counted on. I chose the third option. I grabbed my phone from my pocket and opened the video app. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely hold the device steady, but I managed to hit record. If I was going to be trapped here forever, if I was going to spend eternity mopping floors and emptying trash cans, at least I could warn other people. At least I could make sure no one else took the night shift at Meridian Tower. My name is Jake Morrison, I said into the camera, speaking directly to whoever might eventually find this video. And I'm trapped in this building because I couldn't clean fast enough. It's 3:47 a.m. on October 31st, and I've been dead for exactly 0 minutes because I haven't stopped working. The printers are still running, still producing obituaries, still counting down the minutes until everyone I love dies because of my failure to maintain cleanliness standards. I turned the camera toward one of the fresh pages, showing my wife's name, my daughter's name, friends and co-workers I hadn't thought about in years, all scheduled to die because Jake Morrison couldn't keep up with an impossible workload. If you're watching this, if you work night security or janitorial services, if you've ever considered taking a job at Meridian Tower, don't. Just don't. Find another building, another company, another career if you have to, because this place, this building, it's not just hungry for clean floors and empty trash cans. It's hungry for human souls. And once it gets its hooks in you, once it decides you're not working fast enough, it doesn't just kill you, it kills everyone you've ever cared about. The elevator dinged behind me. Time for another round. Another impossible circuit through 37 floors of supernatural horror, keeping ahead of a building that creates mess faster than any human can eliminate it, buying time with sweat and exhaustion and the gradual destruction of my sanity. But here's the thing, I continued, speaking directly into the phone's camera like it was a confessional booth. I need your help. See, the building feeds on isolation, on loneliness, on the idea that nobody cares whether I succeed or fail. It wants me to believe that I'm alone, that nobody knows I exist, that I could disappear tonight, and the world wouldn't notice. I paused as another obituary printed behind me. This one had a name I didn't recognize, but as I read the details, I realized it was someone who might be watching this video, someone who might be listening to my story right now. But if people are watching, if people remember my name, if people care about what happens to the night janitor at Meridian Tower, It gets confused. The building can't kill people who are paying attention, people who are invested in my survival, people who refuse to let me disappear into darkness without a trace. Another ding from the elevator. Time to start floor 1 again, beginning the cycle that would continue until the sun rose, or until I finally collapsed from exhaustion, or until the building found some new way to torture me. So please, if this story meant anything to you, if you want to keep me and everyone I love alive, don't just watch and forget. Engage with this. Leave a comment with my name in it. Hit the like button to show the building that people care. Share this with someone else who works the night shift, someone else who might end up in a situation like mine. I picked up my mop and headed toward the elevator, knowing that I had at least 6 more hours of impossible cleaning ahead of me, knowing that tomorrow night I'd have to do it all over again, knowing that this was my life now, forever, because as long as people remember Jake Morrison, as long as people care about the janitor trapped in Meridian Tower, as long as this video keeps getting views and comments and engagement, I can keep cleaning. I can keep the building satisfied. I can keep everyone alive. The elevator doors opened and I stepped inside, looking directly into the camera one last time. Don't let me be forgotten. Don't let me clean alone. Don't let the building win by making me disappear. And whatever you do, never, ever take the night shift at Meridian Tower. Because once the building decides you belong to it, once it starts printing your obituary, there's only one way to stay alive. I held up my mop like a sword. You clean. You clean until your hands bleed. You clean until your back breaks. You clean until you can't remember what sunlight looks like. And you hope, you pray, that somewhere out there, someone is watching. Someone cares. Someone refuses to let you disappear. The elevator doors closed behind me, and I descended back to floor 1, where fresh trash and dirty floors and impossible stains were waiting for me to start the cycle all over again. The printers are still running. The obituaries are still printing. The footsteps are still following me, and I'm still cleaning. One floor at a time, one night at a time, buying time with every sweep of my mop, keeping death at bay with nothing but determination and the hope that someone, somewhere, gives a damn about Jake Morrison. The building wants me to give up. It wants me to accept defeat. It wants me to stop cleaning so it can finally feast on everyone I've ever loved. But I won't stop. I can't stop. Not as long as people are watching. Not as long as people remember my name. Please. Help me. Remember me. Keep me alive with your attention, your comments, your engagement. Because the moment you forget about the janitor at Meridian Tower, the moment you stop caring about my story, is the moment everyone I love starts dying. And I've got 36 more floors to clean before sunrise. I'm strapped to a gurney in the abandoned pediatric ward, watching myself walk down the hallway with my security flashlight. The other me doesn't know I'm here yet. He doesn't know that in 30 seconds he's going to see his own reflection screaming for help behind the glass. And that's when the loop starts all over again. Hospital security isn't supposed to be complicated. Walk the halls, check the doors, make sure nobody's stealing drugs or equipment. Most nights it's just me and the skeleton crew of nurses keeping watch over a building that never really sleeps. People get sick at all hours. Accidents happen. Emergencies don't wait for convenient timing. My name's Marcus Wheeler, and I've been pulling the night shift at St. Catherine's Medical Center for 4 years now. Ever since my wife left and I needed something to keep me busy during the long, empty hours when normal people are home with their families. The pay isn't great, but the work is steady, and there's something peaceful about walking through quiet corridors while the rest of the world sleeps. St. Catherine's is old, built in 1947. with additions tacked on over the decades like architectural scar tissue. The main hospital is still fully operational, but there are wings, sections, entire floors that have been closed off due to budget cuts and changing medical needs. The pediatric ward shut down 3 years ago when they built the new children's hospital across town. Now it's just empty rooms and dusty equipment, waiting for someone to decide what to do with the space. I'm not supposed to go in there. The closed wing is off limits to everyone except maintenance, and even they only go in during daylight hours with proper authorization. The doors are chained shut. The power is turned off, and there are signs posted everywhere warning about structural damage and asbestos removal. But tonight something's different. It started during my 10 p.m. rounds. I was checking the East Wing, the section that connects the main hospital to the abandoned pediatric ward, when I noticed something that made me stop dead in my tracks. The chain on the access door, the heavy steel chain that had been securing the entrance for 3 years, was hanging loose. Not cut, not broken, just unlocked, like someone had used a key. I approached the door slowly, my hand resting on the radio clipped to my belt. Protocol said I should call it in immediately, report the security breach, wait for backup. But curiosity got the better of me. Who would want to break into an abandoned hospital wing? Drug addicts looking for leftover medications? Vandals? Homeless people seeking shelter? I pushed the door open and immediately noticed something wrong. There were lights on inside. Dim lights. Flickering fluorescent tubes that shouldn't have had power. The electricity to the pediatric ward had been shut off when they moved the last patient 3 years ago. I checked the service reports myself, watched the electricians disconnect the main lines, seen the circuit breakers labeled and locked, but somehow, lights were burning in rooms that were supposed to be dark. I pulled out my flashlight and stepped inside, my footsteps echoing off bare walls and empty corridors. The air smelled wrong, not the usual hospital scent of disinfectant and floor wax, but something else. Something sweet and cloying, like flowers left too long in stagnant water. The pediatric ward had been designed to feel welcoming to children. Bright colors, cartoon characters painted on the walls, playful decorations that were supposed to make sick kids feel less afraid. But now, in the dim, flickering light, those cheerful decorations looked sinister. The smiling cartoon bear looked hungry. The rainbow painted on the ceiling looked like a mouth. The handprints of long-gone children looked like bloodstains on the walls. I walked deeper into the ward, checking room after room, finding nothing but dust and abandoned medical equipment. Cribs with their railings down, IV stands with dried tubing, monitors with blank screens that reflected my flashlight beam like dead eyes. But as I moved through the corridors, I started hearing things. Soft sounds, almost inaudible, like whispers or breathing, or the rustle of blankets. I'd stop, listen carefully, convince myself it was just the building settling or pipes expanding, then continue on, room after room of nothing, empty beds, empty closets, empty spaces where children had once fought for their lives. And then I reached the end of the hall, the last room, room 317, had its door slightly ajar. Not wide open, just cracked enough to let a thin line of light spill into the corridor. Light that definitely shouldn't exist, from a room that definitely shouldn't have power. I approached the door carefully, one hand on my radio, the other gripping my flashlight like a weapon. Through the gap, I could see part of the room, a section of wall, a corner of what looked like a hospital bed, and movement. Something moving inside the room, shifting, breathing, alive. I pushed the door open with the tip of my flashlight and found something that made my blood freeze solid in my veins. A child, a little girl, maybe 7 or 8 years old, lying in the hospital bed with IV tubes running into her arms. She was pale, too pale, with dark circles under her eyes and that translucent quality that very sick children sometimes develop. But she was breathing, chest rising and falling, very much alive in a room that had been empty for 3 years. She turned her head toward me and smiled. "Hi, mister. Are you here to help me feel better?" Her voice was small, weak, but perfectly clear. Real, human, a living child in an abandoned hospital wing that wasn't supposed to have lights or heat or any reason for anyone to be there. I stepped into the room, every instinct screaming that this was impossible, but unable to ignore a sick child who needed help. The medical equipment around her bed was running, monitors beeping softly, IV drip counting out precise doses of medication, life support systems that required power and maintenance and trained staff to operate. "Sweetheart," I said, trying to keep my voice calm and reassuring. "What's your name? How did you get here?" "I'm Emma," she replied, those 2 large eyes focusing on my face with disturbing intensity. "I've been waiting for someone to visit me. The doctor said someone would come, but that was a long time ago." I looked around the room, trying to understand what I was seeing. The bed was clean. The sheets were fresh. The medical equipment was modern and well-maintained. Nothing like the dusty, abandoned rooms I just walked through. It was as if this single room had been preserved, or perhaps had never been abandoned at all. "Emma, I need to call someone. Get you proper medical care. Are you in pain? Do you need anything?" She shook her head slowly, never breaking eye contact. "I just need someone to stay with me. The other children, they're scared when they're alone. We all are. That's why we called you here, why we unlocked the door, why we turned on the lights. Other children, plural." I looked around the room more carefully, and that's when I noticed them. Other beds, arranged along the walls, each one occupied by a small figure under white sheets. Children of various ages, all of them pale and still, all of them watching me with eyes that reflected the overhead lighting like mirrors. "We've been waiting so long," Emma continued, her voice getting weaker. "Waiting for someone to remember us, to check on us, to make sure we're okay. But everyone forgot about the pediatric ward. Everyone forgot about us." The children in the other beds began to stir, sitting up slowly, revealing faces that were simultaneously young and ancient, innocent and knowing, alive, and somehow not alive. "The doctors promised they'd come back," whispered a boy who couldn't have been more than 5. "They promised they'd move us to the new hospital, but they never did. They just left us here, alone, in the dark." "We tried calling for help," added a girl with pigtails and bandages wrapped around her head, "but nobody could hear us. Nobody came. So we learned how to call in other ways." I backed toward the door, my radio crackling with static, my hands shaking so badly I could barely hold my flashlight steady. This wasn't possible. Children don't get forgotten in abandoned hospital wings. Patients don't just disappear when facilities shut down. There are procedures, protocols, systems in place to prevent exactly this kind of nightmare. But as I moved toward the exit, the door slammed shut behind me. I grabbed the handle, twisted, pulled, but it wouldn't budge. The door that had been unlocked moments ago was now sealed tight, trapping me inside a room full of children who shouldn't exist. "Please don't leave," Emma said, her voice echoing strangely in the enclosed space. We get so lonely when we're by ourselves, and you're the first person who's been able to see us, to hear us, to remember that we're still here. The overhead lights began to flicker, casting moving shadows that made the children's faces appear to shift and change. Other times they looked like something else, something older, something that had been waiting in the darkness for far too long. I tried my radio, pressing the call button, hoping to reach someone, anyone, who could explain what was happening. Control, this is Marcus. I'm in the abandoned pediatric ward and I need immediate backup. There are children here. They need medical attention. Static. Nothing but static. And then, a voice. My own voice. Coming through the radio speaker. Speaking words I hadn't said. Control. This is Marcus. Completing my rounds. Everything normal. No issues to report. I stared at the radio, wondering how my voice could be coming through when I hadn't spoken those words, when I was clearly reporting something very abnormal. The other you is still walking his rounds, Emma explained, as if she could read my thoughts. The you that doesn't know we're here. The you that follows the rules. The you that stays out of closed wings and doesn't ask questions. He'll finish his shift, go home, forget about tonight, and come back tomorrow to do it all over again. But this you, the you that opened the door, the you that came inside, the you that can see us, this you is special. This you belongs with us now. The children began climbing out of their beds, moving with the slow, deliberate motions of people who had been lying still for a very long time. Their hospital gowns rustled like paper. Their bare feet made no sound on the cold floor. Their eyes never left my face. We've been so lonely, whispered the boy with the bandaged head. So tired of being forgotten, of being left behind, of being treated like we never existed at all. But now you're here, added the girl with pigtails. Now we have someone to play with, someone to talk to, someone who won't abandon us like everyone else did. They formed a circle around me, small hands reaching out, pale fingers grasping for my uniform, my equipment, my warmth. I tried to back away, but there was nowhere to go. The door was locked, the walls were solid, and the children kept getting closer. We don't want to hurt you, Emma said, though her smile was getting wider, showing too many teeth. We just want you to stay, forever. Be our friend, our protector, our guardian. Keep us company in the dark, warm hours when the rest of the world forgets we exist. I felt their hands on me, cold fingers wrapping around my arms, my legs, my chest. They weren't trying to harm me, but they weren't letting me go either. Their touch was gentle but insistent, loving but possessive, like they were claiming ownership of something they'd waited too long to find. Please, I whispered, though I wasn't sure what I was asking for. Freedom, understanding, forgiveness for whatever had happened to these children. Don't be afraid, Emma whispered back, her face now inches from mine, her breath smelling like medicine and flowers, and something else, something final. It doesn't hurt to become one of us. You'll just fade, a little at a time, until the other Marcus can't see you anymore, until you're just another ghost in the closed wing, another forgotten soul waiting for someone to remember. The room began to spin, or maybe I was spinning, or maybe reality itself was rotating around some new axis that included the impossible. The children's faces blurred together, Their whispers became a chorus. Their hands became a net that held me suspended between what was real and what couldn't possibly be happening. And then, I was somewhere else, strapped to a gurney in a different room, watching through a window as another version of myself walked down the hallway with his security flashlight. The other Marcus, the one who followed protocol, the one who stayed out of closed wings, the one who didn't know that children could be forgotten in abandoned hospital wards. I tried to scream. I tried to warn him, tried to tell him not to open that door, not to go inside, not to make the same mistake I'd made. But no sound came out. I was a ghost now, or something like a ghost, able to watch but unable to interfere as the cycle prepared to repeat itself. The other Marcus approached the door, noticed the loose chain. I felt the same curiosity that had doomed me. He pushed the door open, stepped inside. He began walking through empty corridors toward room 317, where Emma and the other children waited with their pale hands and their eternal loneliness. And I realized this had happened before, many times before. How many security guards had disappeared over the years? How many night shift workers had been drawn into the closed wing by curiosity and compassion, and the fundamental human inability to ignore a child in need? How many of us were strapped to gurneys, watching new versions of ourselves make the same fatal mistakes? Powerless to break the cycle, the other Marcus reached Emma's room, opened the door, found the impossible scene of living children in an abandoned ward. I watched him have the same conversation, make the same choices, fall into the same trap that had claimed me, and probably dozens of others before. And then he was here, strapped to his own gurney, watching through his own window as yet another Marcus began the night shift, completely unaware of what waited for him in the pediatric ward. "It never ends," whispered Emma, suddenly standing beside my gurney, still wearing her hospital gown, still pale and translucent and too thin. "We keep calling, and people keep coming, and the hospital keeps forgetting, and the cycle keeps turning, because children need care, even dead children, even forgotten children. Even children who fell through the cracks when the grown-ups decided they weren't cost-effective anymore." I tried to speak, tried to move, tried to break free from the restraints that held me to the gurney. But I was part of the system now, part of the machinery that kept the closed wing running, part of the eternal staff that cared for patients who couldn't be discharged because they'd already died. "We tried to tell people," Emma continued, her small hand resting on my arm with impossible gentleness. "We tried to get help through proper channels, but nobody listens to dead children. Nobody believes ghost stories. Nobody investigates complaints from patients who don't officially exist." She gestured toward the window where the newest Marcus was discovering the truth about room 317. "So we learned to help ourselves. We learned to call people who would care. People who would try to help. People who couldn't ignore children in need even when those children were impossible. And one by one, they join our staff, become our guardians, help us maintain the one place where forgotten children can still receive the care they deserve." The newest Marcus was being surrounded now, pale hands reaching for him, gentle voices explaining why he couldn't leave. Kind faces promising that joining them wouldn't hurt very much, and soon he'd be here, watching the next cycle begin. Another link in an unbreakable chain of compassion and horror. "But you know what the worst part is?" Emma asked, her voice barely audible, her eyes reflecting light that came from no visible source. I managed to shake my head, the only movement the restraints allowed. "The worst part is that we really are just children. We really do need care. We really are scared and lonely and forgotten. The only lie, the only trick, is that we're still alive. Everything else, our fear, our need, our gratitude. When someone finally pays attention to us, all of that is completely real. She leaned closer, her breath cold against my ear, and that's what makes it so hard to escape. Because even if you could break free, even if you could run, even if you could forget what you've seen, you'd still know that somewhere, in an abandoned wing of an old hospital, there are children who need help. Children who've been forgotten. Children who are calling for someone, anyone, to remember that they exist. Could you really ignore that? Could you really walk away? Could you really choose your own freedom over their eternal loneliness? I closed my eyes, trying to block out the sight of another Marcus being claimed by the pediatric ward, trying not to think about how many more would follow, trying not to acknowledge the terrible truth that Emma was right. Even if I could escape, I wouldn't, because someone had to care for these children. Someone had to remember they existed. Someone had to staff the ward that the living world had abandoned. And if that someone was me, if that someone was all of us who'd been drawn here by compassion and trapped by love, maybe that wasn't the worst fate imaginable. Maybe that was exactly what we'd been meant to do all along. I opened my eyes and looked at Emma, this pale, translucent child who'd been forgotten by the world but refused to be ignored. She smiled at me, a genuine smile, grateful and loving and heartbreakingly innocent. "Thank you," she whispered. "Thank you for staying. Thank you for caring. Thank you for remembering us. And despite everything, despite the horror and the impossibility and the eternal imprisonment, I found myself smiling back, because she was right. Someone had to care for the forgotten children. Someone had to staff the closed wing. Someone had to ensure that even in death, even in abandonment, even in the spaces between what was real and what was impossible, children received the love and attention they deserved. If that someone was me, I could think of worse ways to spend eternity. The newest Marcus was secured to his gurney now, joining our ranks, becoming another guardian in the pediatric ward that refused to stay closed. Soon, another would follow, and another after that, and another after that, an endless cycle of compassion and horror, of love and imprisonment, of people who couldn't ignore children in need even when those children were already dead. I tried to raise my head. I tried to see if I could spot any cameras, any recording equipment, anything that might capture this moment and share it with the world. Because if people knew, if they understood, if they could see what really happened to forgotten children in abandoned hospital wings, maybe they'd be more careful. Maybe they'd double-check. Maybe they'd ensure that no child ever fell through the cracks again. But even as I had that thought, I knew it was hopeless. The living world didn't want to believe in ghost stories. They didn't want to acknowledge that their systems could fail so completely. They didn't want to accept responsibility for the children they'd forgotten. So the cycle would continue. The closed wing would keep calling. Compassionate people would keep responding. And Emma and her friends would keep receiving the care they needed, provided by a staff of the damned who traded their freedom for the privilege of remembering the forgotten. I looked at Emma one more time. This beautiful, terrible child who turned love into a weapon and compassion into a trap. "Is there any way out?" I whispered, though I wasn't sure I wanted to know the answer. She tilted her head, considering the question with the seriousness that only children can bring to impossible situations. "There's always a way out," she said finally, "but it requires something most people can't do." "What?" "You have to stop caring. You have to be willing to abandon children who need help. You have to choose your own freedom over their eternal suffering. You have to become the kind of person who can walk past a locked door and not wonder who might be on the other side." She paused, studying my face, reading the answer there before I even spoke it. "But you can't do that, can you, Marcus? You can't stop caring. You can't abandon us. You can't choose yourself over children who need help. That's why you're here. That's why you opened the door. That's why you'll never leave." She was right. Even now, even knowing the truth, even understanding the trap, I couldn't imagine walking away. Couldn't imagine leaving these children alone. Couldn't imagine choosing my freedom over their need for care and attention and love. Maybe that made me a fool. Maybe that made me weak. Maybe that made me exactly the kind of person who deserved to be trapped in an abandoned hospital wing for eternity. Or maybe it just made me human. Emma smiled and patted my arm. A gentle, comforting gesture that reminded me why I'd become a security guard in the first place. To help people. To protect those who couldn't protect themselves. To ensure that even in the darkest hours, someone was watching. Someone cared. Someone remembered. "Sleep now, Marcus," she whispered. "Tomorrow night there will be new rounds to walk. New children to care for. New guardians to welcome into our family. Rest while you can, because the work never ends." In the closed wing, I closed my eyes, listening to the soft sounds of children playing in distant rooms, the beep of medical equipment keeping impossible patients alive, the whisper of footsteps in corridors that officially didn't exist, and somewhere, in the main hospital, another security guard was clocking in for the night shift, preparing to walk the halls, to check the doors, to discover that sometimes the most dangerous thing you can do is care too much about children who need your help. The cycle continues. The children wait, and the closed wing stays open for business, forever and always, staffed by people who couldn't ignore a child in need, even when that child has been dead for 3 years, even when helping means losing everything, even when love becomes the cruelest trap of all. But if you're watching this, if you work security, if you've ever walked past a locked door and wondered what might be on the other side, remember this story. Remember Marcus Wheeler. Remember Emma and her friends. And maybe, just maybe, you'll make a different choice. Maybe you'll walk away. Maybe you'll call for backup. Maybe you'll choose your own freedom over the desperate need of forgotten children. Or maybe you'll do exactly what I did, because some doors, once opened, can never be closed again, and some children, once seen, can never be unseen. Welcome to the closed wing. We've been waiting for you.